So everyone, thanks for attending today. My name is Dan Sandink. I'm co-chair of this group with Chad Nelson. Thanks very much for joining. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I'm going to pass it over to you, Chad.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dan. And my welcome as well to everybody to the 46th meeting of the Infrastructure and Buildings Working Group, held under the auspices of the Adaptation Platform. Our last meeting was on June 25th, and the minutes were sent out on July 7th by Anna Murphy. At that meeting, we talked about resilience electrical grid and resilient housing as key topics. For our new participants who may be wondering what you've dialed into, as I mentioned, this group's convened underneath the National Adaptation Platform. We meet a minimum of 4 times a year to exchange leading practices on all things related to buildings, infrastructure, and climate adaptation and resilience. Today, we're going to be hearing about wildfires, as well as the National Model Code System and tackling climate risk. To set a little context, I did want to mention that I found an article stating that by mid-August, over 7 million hectares in Canada had burned this past summer from wildfire, which was double the 10-year average by that time of year, roughly the same size as New Brunswick. In fact, as we speak, the Lake George wildfire northwest of Halifax remains out of control with some mandatory evacuation zones. So just to say that here at IBWG, we continue to seek to bring you topics for discussion that are relevant and pressing across the country. As an open forum, please do feel free to invite colleagues to participate in the working group. Please signal to Dan or me or our coordinator, Anna Murphy, if you'd like to be added to the membership list. Anna's away today at the Livable Cities Forum held by ICLR in Halifax, and we're fortunate to have one of our colleagues, Josh Innes, step in for her today on this call. And perhaps Josh can paste your email address in the chat as well. The meeting is being recorded, and as always, if any members would like to revisit previous sessions, the meetings are posted to a private YouTube link provided in the meeting notes. And I think for interventions, as per usual, please do switch on your camera when making a comment or asking a question and identifying yourself. And otherwise, please ensure that your microphone is muted generally through the call. At any time during the meeting, please feel free, as Dan was saying, to enter comments or resources or questions in the chat. And Josh and Dan and I will monitor that. That chat is a good feature for us to mine if you wish to share reports, conferences, key upcoming kind of engagement opportunities that we will then reflect in the meeting minutes when we send them out following this call today. And I will just speak briefly about the membership. So we maintain an open membership directory where you're invited to contribute your name, contact info, and professional interests, which will be publicly posted if the interest of this group is sufficient. With that being said, please share or use the member directory responsibly. We'll share the link for those of you that haven't had the chance to fill it out or are new participants today, and we'll paste that into the chat. So I'm now pleased to introduce our first speaker for today. I will be here to help with the questions. We're going to have about 15 minutes or so of presentation to 20, followed by about 10 minutes of questions. And our first presenter, Laird Monroe, is the National Manager of the Commercial Interest Center of Expertise for Parks Canada. His group comprises the Commercial Interest Team, providing analysis, advice, and guidance on rents, fees, and commercial agreements, and the Land Use Planning Services Team, who are responsible for the application of the new land use planning regulations, and similarly provides advice and guidance to Parks Canada staff. Laird's going to speak with us about lessons learned from the 2024 Jasper wildfires rebuild. So over to you, Laird.
Thanks so much, Chad. Good morning, everyone. It's morning for those of us out here in Alberta and West, and obviously afternoon for everybody east of the dividing line. I have a presentation here that's heavy on slides, but short on content because I wanted to get to the point where we asked meaningful questions, and just provide some context in the background here. I'm going to share my screen right now and make sure that we are all hopefully seeing the same thing. It tells me that you are. Excellent. Thanks, Chad. Appreciate the confirmation. Moving right in, I just want to, for those of you who may not be familiar with the situation, here's what I'm going to talk about really quickly today: the town of Jasper and the park itself. the July 2020 fire that destroyed a third of the town, recovery, rebuild, and many more words that start with RE. Temporary housing challenges and strategies, our permanent rebuilding efforts, and a look at Jasper into the future. So first of all, for those of you who don't know much about the national park system or the town sites and parks, there are 7 town sites and parks. Jasper is one of them. Jasper, Lake Louise, Banff, Waterton, Waskesiu, Wasagaming, and Field are the town sites that are found within a national park setting. Jasper specifically was one of the oldest parks, created in 1907, designated as a park in 1911, became known as Jasper in 1913. More recently, it has a long and rich history. I could spend days on that. In 1995, the Jasper Improvement District was created by the province of Alberta. That improvement district covers the area that is in the town, but is also larger than the town. The improvement district itself is not just the town site, but an area larger. In 2000, the new Canada National Parks Act, which is the most recent legislation that we all operate under, designated Jasper as one of the 7 park communities. An interesting feature that we'll discuss later is that all of the park communities have a legislated cap on commercial development in square meters, always expressed in square meters. In 2001, the town had expressed for some time a desire to have a local representative elected government, and the agreement for the establishment of local government in the town of Jasper was created. That allowed them to then create an elected government. Simultaneously, the province of Alberta created the special municipality of Jasper, which now then operates as a normal municipality, with one exception, and that is from other municipal levels of government, the land use planning and development function rested with Parks Canada. Everything else, the provision of services, happens through the MOJ, the municipality of Jasper. Just to locate us geographically, there's a quick look at most of Western Canada. You'll see Jasper. In Alberta, we tend to think of Jasper as being north, although you can see geographically it is anything but north, particularly for a Parks Canada guy where we have so many parks north of the provincial boundaries. Getting a little closer, you'll see it's situated close to a couple of major population centers, Edmonton and Calgary. Both of these are about 3 to 4 hours out. It's about 3.5 hours from Edmonton over Highway 16 to Jasper, and about 4 hours from Calgary. You would go up here through Highway 1 and then take Highway 93, also known as the Icefields Parkway, between Banff up to Jasper. And here is a zoomed in look at Jasper itself. You can see this parallelogram, multi-sided parallelogram. That's the improvement district, or the municipality of Jasper. Zoomed in one more time, this section here is the actual town site itself. So when I talk a little bit about the fires later, there was a fire that originated north of the city, north of the town, just up here, actually on this side, sorry, on the west side, and another one that originated south and west of the town in July of 2024. This map is one that my municipal colleagues will be more familiar with all of the individual plots and places. Jasper itself is a town site. It's about 5,000 people, gets about 2.5 million visitors a year, and up to 20,000 temporary residents who come in to service those guests. All occupied lands are leased by Parks Canada to the lessees. Part of the agreement with the town of Jasper is within the town of Jasper, all of those leases are actually set at $1 per year, and the municipality of Jasper charges property tax and provides services. In Parks Canada's world, the dirty little secret essentially is that for the most part, lease rates are set as a function of being able to collect the tax to service the collecting a tax by a different name in order to service provide the municipal services in the area. Outside the town, leases are set at a market rate. It's usually for commercial a percentage of gross revenue. In some cases, it's a percentage of appraised land value. That's particularly prevalent for residential cases. There are some carve-outs and some regulatory oddities in there, like Edith Lake Cottages. Some people may be familiar with that area. But the municipality of Jasper provides all the usual municipal services, and Parks Canada issues development permits or declines them. and controls land use planning on a long-term basis in the town. Let's move on to the fire. Just to reset everybody, in early July of 2024, it's exceptionally hot and dry in the region. It had been dry for some time. Alberta is a pretty dry province at the best of times, so exceptionally dry is saying something. On July 22nd, there's 2 lightning strikes that each start a fire, a wildfire, one north of the town site and one south. In terms of how quickly this moves, by July 23rd, the southern fire is already 10,800 hectares and only 8 kilometers from the town site. The northern fire is about 270 hectares, and the 2 of them together result in Parks Canada having concerns about essentially the egress routes, Highway 16 and Highway 93, being closed because of the fire. So we issue an evacuation order. Takes all of 1 day. 25,000 people are evacuated from the area. Reception centers are set up throughout Alberta and into British Columbia. There's a variety of small towns in British Columbia, Valemount, all the way down into Kamloops, Kelowna, Prince George, all accepted people. To the east, Hinton in Alberta, all the way over to Edmonton, and then as far down as my hometown here in Calgary, all had reception centers to receive visitors or evacuees from Jasper. On July 24th, the fire reaches the town. We withdrew most of the first responders from the town other than firefighting crews that are focused on containing spot fires and protecting structures. Firefighters in the town described a 100-meter tall wall of flame advancing on the town itself, with a dense shower of sparks and burning debris preceding it, coming in. The fire was big enough that it created its own weather system, so that created some tremendous challenges in terms of containing or preventing the kind of structural fire we did see. A little bit of disaster porn. You can see here the scope and scale of the fire. Some images from within the town. These are all just taken from news reports in and around the area. This area here is, we'll see later in a map, called Cabin Creek. You can see the residential devastation there. At the end of it, within a day, 338 of 1,113 structures within the town are destroyed, affected about 850 residents. Extensive fire and smoke damage to more than 100 others, a variety of severities. And a handful of structures adjacent to the town were also destroyed. Places like Jasper Park Lodge lost a couple of buildings, complete loss of Takara Lodge, Pyramid Lakes Lodge. Those are outside the town, but within the fire region. Thankfully, no serious injuries or fatalities amongst visitors or residents during the evacuation or immediate fire. 10 days later, unfortunately, a young man by the name of Morgan Kitchen was killed fighting the fire just outside of the town. We call that the Jasper Complex wildfire. Eventually, there turned out to be 3 fires. There was the 2 that I already mentioned, then a third one that started likely from leaping flames, leaping debris from elsewhere, and the 3 of them merged together. We call that the Jasper Complex wildfire. Morgan was killed fighting that fire 10 days later. The impact of the fire, and this probably speaks most closely to this group, $1.3 billion in insured losses in the built environment. $800 million-ish in Parks Canada losses. As some of you may be aware, the federal government is a self-insured entity, so there is not a third party that's on the hook for that. Those are costs that will come to Canadians directly if we choose to rebuild them all. The visitation impact cannot be understated, from 2.5 million visitors to 1.14 in 24-25. That represents an almost complete loss of the summer of 2024, and then a significant decrease in the winter of 24-25. Federal government, I don't know if I need to say this for everybody, but just for clarity, April 1st to March 30th are the fiscal years, which is why I described those terms. About $300 million in economic activity lost in that period immediately, and $150 million in immediate response firefighting and recovery costs. This map here again is the town of Jasper. It looks a little bit like a foot pointed to the left. Down here in the bottom corner, this is the southwest corner of the town, is the area known as Cabin Creek. This entire area was burnt out. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. I hope you can. This entire area was burnt out. This area here, which is known as the Compact Lot District, was also extensive damage. And then a variety of buildings here within the town. Cannot Drive is the main drive that everybody will have seen all the usual tourism pictures of. You can see here a number of structures and buildings burnt out. Almost all of the damage here is contained to the south end of the town. The structures that I talked about earlier that are outside the town actually are north of the town and sort of out in the what we would call not wilderness, but certainly backcountry kind of style areas, with the exception of Jasper Park Lodge. Recovery thus far, $383 million invested thus far in the recovery and rebuilding of Jasper. That's not including, that's on top of the $150+ million in the response. And certainly on top of the insured losses and uninsured losses. All of that's happening under the auspices of the Jasper Recovery Coordination Center, which is staffed by officials from Parks Canada and the MOJ, the Municipality of Jasper. That we moved very quickly to establish that, to ensure coordination, clear, timely communication across, and it's been a real success point for Parks Canada and the municipality. The JRCC, as we call it, has been central to communicating to residents, townspeople, politicians, guiding work throughout. By October of 2024, we were already out there trying to service sites for temporary housing. And by early December, the servicing was completed. One of the vagaries of operating in a town that is heavily constrained because of the boundaries that are put around the town, both for commercial and residential development, is that the extension of services is not as simple as it would be in some places. If there weren't services before, there's a significant need to ensure that we are doing it in an environmentally conscious way. So this represents a tremendously quick response. By February of 2025, temporary housing began arriving. Parks Canada has participated, along with the federal government, in bringing about 400 residents temporary housing on the site. As you can tell from my earlier slide, that's well short of the 850 people who were displaced. Many of those people have found alternate accommodations themselves, either in rental properties that became available in Jasper or in surrounding areas like Hinton. And others, their properties may have been seasonal only, and so they're just choosing not to currently occupy. By October of 2024, we'd published an initial rebuilding guide with the intention of streamlining processes for permit applications and providing residents with the guidance they needed to get working on demolition, environmental requirements, etc. This came out of frankly, some analysis of the Fort McMurray fire that had happened several years earlier in Alberta. One of the things that the report from the Fort McMurray fire had pointed out was the importance of timely communication and guidelines. So we acted very quickly to put together that rebuilding guide. The downside of that rebuilding guide is that you're constantly putting it out early anyways, is that you're constantly revising it as you come into new situations. So there is a little bit of, you're always the two devils on your shoulder. One is fast and accurate for now, and the other one is complete and accurate for the long term. And those two are constantly fighting, and you're trying to split the difference for people who are in, frankly, one of the most difficult situations any of us can imagine, with your home burnt out, your business burnt out, and your entire town really reeling from the impacts. Recovery is what we talk about in the immediate post-fire elements. We have response. The big three REs are response, recovery, and then rebuild. So recovery is the immediate, get people back into their homes, start working towards the rebuild. Those things happen fairly quickly. As you can see, we're 5 months out from the fire, 6 months out from the fire. We already have temporary housing arriving. We're starting to replace people in at least temporary homes and aiming towards the rebuild. The rebuild itself is much less fast. and particularly because of the locations. We'll talk a little bit about the challenges here. These statistics are very current. They're only a couple weeks old. You can see here 291 properties have been certified. The soil has been sampled. The debris has been cleared. They are ready to build on. There are still a number of homes that are requiring soil sampling surveys. That's another issue we'll talk about in a little bit. And there's a small number of properties that still have debris on them. Most of that, again, is to do with insurance concerns or absentee tenants, frankly. So, talking a little bit about challenges, the national park context. So the town site boundary is legislated. The town site itself has a legislated boundary. Again, that boundary is inside of the municipality of Jasper, so there is areas that the municipality controls that are still within the park, but not within the town site. The way I try and explain it to people is think of concentric circles. The smallest one is the town, the next one is the municipality, and the next one is the Jasper National Park itself. Commercial development is constrained. It's constrained from a cap perspective as well as a zoning perspective. There is a Jasper zoning regulation that actually wasn't implemented as a regulation. It became a local land use policy that constrains where certain things can be, and that was one of the struggles with finding temporary housing and even projecting into future more permanent housing. Was land that people could see literally across the highway was not designated as part of the town site, not designated for residential, not designated for commercial. It had no servicing, no access to servicing, and had never been surveyed properly in order to provide its ease of use for those purposes. We are Parks Canada, so environmental conservation is the first priority. So we are very cautious about ensuring that we are not disturbing the environment or making undue environmental impact in the area in our efforts to try and get people back. Now, I would tell you that we took a much more people-centric approach to this on the way through, but there are still elements of it that require us to be cautious. The practical example that I would use there was soil sampling. So in the Alberta context, after the Fort McMurray fire, the soil sampling standard they used was different from the one that Parks Canada chose to use, which did create some properties that needed remediation above and beyond what would have been required under the Alberta standard that they used for Fort Mac. We're happy with that. We think we think it's unfortunate. The number of properties is probably sub 25 that required additional remediation, but it is an important consideration for us that we're ensuring environmental conservation and the appropriateness of rebuilding. Capacity within the national park context, because you have a constrained environment, the development office in Jasper would handle 5 to 10 major rebuilds a year or new builds in a year. Well over 100 plus smaller applications, but 5 to 10 major renovations, and now facing 358 applications. It's 338 buildings, 358 applications that also require, more than a regular rebuild or a regular renovation. They require debris removal, soil sampling, remediation results, and then new construction development is a very different animal. Parks Canada's approach, frankly, has been to throw resources at it. We have resourced that group heavily. They're about 5 times the size they were before. And in conjunction with that, we've streamlined processes to smooth them out, make them as fast as possible, in conjunction with our partners at the municipality of Jasper through the JRCC. Land Use Planning and Development Authority. So there's maybe 2 elements I'd like to talk about here. First of all, the municipality has been expressing, and we've been working on a project with them from about 2022 forward, late 2022 forward, to establish land use planning and development as a municipality of Jasper function rather than a Parks Canada function. Obviously, the fire created some concern around that, and initially there was a desire to move that more quickly. So Parks Canada put forward an amendment to legislation, which those of you who are in the federal government will appreciate this. In about 7 weeks, we went from concept to a legislative amendment to the Canada National Parks Act. to permit Jasper to take on the land use authority and development. However, that was really just an enabling legislation that still required the detail work in the background for Jasper to take it on. Since then, attention has been focused on rebuilding processes and rebuilding itself through the JRCC. So we have not really moved the needle tremendously on the transfer yet, although those discussions have recently started again. Our changes to development guidelines, one of the reasons we haven't moved on the transfer of authority is right now the field unit superintendent. So Parks Canada's organizational structure essentially has a regional director called the field unit superintendent that oversees the Jasper National Park and Jasper Townsite. Land use planning and development changes are done under the authority of that field unit superintendent. And so we've been able to move very quickly to make amendments to previous land use policies, bylaws, etc., within the regulations that we previously discussed. Some of those are pretty straightforward, and I'll leave this for questions later. And some of those are much more complex. Any of you who are involved in municipal planning will know this. Sounds like a great idea to encourage more density until somebody says, well, where are they all going to park? Well, where are they all going to work? Does the sewer line actually take that kind of density? These are the kind of things that, where possible, we've tried to make targeted amendments as quickly as possible. In other areas, we've had to push back and say, listen, we think that needs sort of community consultation. What is an appropriate density for a neighborhood? Coordination of effort. The JRCC has been tremendous for us, and we work very closely with the municipality, but certainly there are competing voices and approaches to the way that the town should be both go through recovery and into rebuild. Early on, the province of Alberta announced that they were prepared to provide modular housing to Jasper. However, the modular housing that they had offered essentially would have provided beds for less than 100 people and would have taken up all of the available land that we've since been able to put in about 400 people. Now, the upside of what they were doing was that housing could have remained post rebuild and been permanent housing stock. The downside is you've got 850 people looking for housing and you've only got about 100 houses. Ultimately, what ended up happening was the government of Canada took the lead there to provide temporary housing. And our intention is once that temporary housing has been, it runs its natural course when the rebuild is complete, we'll remove that and then we'll analyze whether or not those lots need to be released for future housing and how and under what conditions we'll allow them to be built. Beyond that, that's just the provincial federal coordination. I would say that there's a tremendous amount of coordination required between folks like the IBC, the Insurance Bureau of Canada, Build Alberta, representing all of the builders in Alberta, the Canadian Red Cross that provided immediate short-term aid and actually operates some of these temporary housing areas we've talked about, so installations. Independent contractors, financial institutions, banks, as you can imagine, are very interested in the approach throughout. So there's been a tremendous amount of coordination effort on the way through. And the obvious one, remote location and weather. You're 4 hours, 3.5 hours from a major population center. It increases costs, reduces material and service availability, and challenges labor access. I just cannot overstate how important that remoteness is to the availability of solutions that seem like the sort of things that anywhere else you would be like, oh, we can probably manage this. In a town of 5,000 people, Hinton, 45 minutes up the road, is 10,000 people, and you're 3.5 hours to Edmonton at 1,200,000, 1,300,000, provides tremendous complexity. You're also in the middle of a national park, so we're also not going to permit you to just build a gravel pit somewhere and start extracting rock in order to start the rebuild process. So finding availability of raw materials is another challenge. Even access. Highway 93 is not suitable for commercial traffic through the winter. Some limited enterprising individuals will try it, but that is a winter road that is suspect at best in tough conditions. And Highway 16 is also, it's a secondary highway. We're not talking about the Trans-Canada here. In some areas, it's fantastic. In other areas, again, winter conditions prevail. The cold temperatures, as most of the people I think on this call would understand, slow down rebuilding efforts. People don't really want to be pouring concrete when the permafrost is set in. You can heat the ground, but again, you've added cost, you've added complexity, you've added time. These are problems. In terms of availability of the workforce, we have set up in what were campground sites before, work camps that we've worked together with Build Alberta and contractors and the Red Cross to provide access or at least housing for the labor that will be needed to complete the rebuild. That still doesn't address how you're getting the people there and what the cost implication of that is. The cost implication of that obviously is not just an issue for Parks Canada, but for every single homeowner who may have a cap on what their insured losses were. So the $350 a square foot that you most recently built a house for in Jasper might be $800 or $900 a square foot. Again, just some evidence of the work that's already going on. This is a condo complex on Patricia Street on the southwest end of the town. This building is a little bit more central, and in fairness, this building actually was already already had a development permit in place when the fire hit. But as you can see, they were able to move forward and complete their at least the exterior framing. They're not quite at lockup yet. And some of the commercial buildings have now started getting their superstructures built, on which the rest of the building will eventually be erected. I would say that building has now moved into a more aggressive phase, but we're challenged by time. We're now into October. So it remains to be seen how many people take the opportunity to build across the winter and how many wait for hopefully lower cost and better availability in the spring. Questions?
Thank you very much, Laird. Yeah, let's have some questions. What a significant story for Canada, iconic. I think a charismatic aspect of Canadian identity. And so we're at this moment where we're really welcoming your questions, particularly on sort of lessons learned, transferable, replicable aspects. And I'm watching the chat and I'm trying to watch for hands up. So, and this is always sort of a collective effort with Dan and Josh, but I know I have a couple of quick thoughts, which is just the lessons for sort of Indigenous and remote community rebuilds. I'm thinking, Laird, about Canada and just the high proportion of Indigenous and rural remote communities that we have, but I keep wondering, like, wherever we can draw best practices from experiences like this that are, because I hear that about that remoteness to the labor force, and it makes me think about other situations in Canada where we have such a high proportion of Indigenous communities affected by wildfire, but obviously not quite as commercially big in a way as Jasper. So it's just, are there lessons learned that are transferable for when we're evacuating because of wildfire, other communities and needing to rebuild them? Because we are Lytton and others, there's so many other relevant related stories. Maybe I'll just try to break the ice that way.
Sure, Chad. I would tell you, first of all, Parks Canada is very proud of the work we do with Indigenous communities across the country. We are, as we're often referred to, as the pointy end of Parks Canada's or the Government of Canada's reconciliation efforts, because we actually interface so closely with so many people, Indigenous peoples across the country, and truly Indigenous, not just First Nations, not just Métis, not just Aboriginal. We're talking about the entire range of Indigenous peoples. The time to start is not post-wildfire. The time to start is now. Jasper has benefited from the Jasper Indigenous Forum that has been in place for at least a decade, probably 2 decades now, where we regularly communicate and consult with Indigenous groups that have interests in the area. The Jasper Banff corridor has a tremendous array of Indigenous interests that are represented. up to 20 different Indigenous groups at any given time. So we do our best to communicate with them and through them on a pretty regular basis and establish those relationships. Even then, the struggle here is, first of all, getting consensus and whether or not consensus matters or if individual Indigenous interest matters, and then finding a path forward. On the procurement side, we pretty regularly include a desire to see Indigenous representation within bids for proposals that have been put out for an RFP. But I would say that all of that is only because we have the contacts and the lists and the relationships built. And even then, it's challenging. So I would just recommend everybody from Parks Canada's perspective, one of the reasons we're successful, frankly, is effort and time. We've been spending a lot of effort on this for a very long time. And I would suggest that if your futures involve Indigenous relationships, and frankly, they mostly all should, now is the time to get started on just building the relationships without an object in mind, without a goal necessarily.
Thanks. That's great. And we have a couple questions coming up in the chat now. So the first one was, do you have any sense of whether the wildfires have had a significant impact on homelessness in Jasper to date? And I'm seeing another question. I'll just make a point of time that roughly we'll want to turn shortly after 1:40 to our next presenter. But the first question is about homelessness and any impacts there.
Sure. Jasper had a relatively low homelessness rate because of its remoteness. It tends not to have that. We did have a lot of what I would call suboptimal living situations, people couch surfing, etc. Particularly in the summer period, that's our high visitation period. So lots of people living in 3 people in a dorm style at best room, some probably not compliant living arrangements. So it's exacerbated that problem. I don't know if it's good or bad thing, but certainly the drop in visitation and the impact to businesses has seemed to correlate with that. So we haven't seen that be a significant driver of decision making around homelessness in Jasper.
Okay, that's great. And the next question, which relates to one that I want to ask, but Sarah Neal of FCM is mentioning what measures are being implemented to reduce future wildfire risk during the rebuild. And I'll just tag on to that by mentioning sort of, we know of, and this community is familiar with the Wildland Urban Interface, National Guide on Fires, and Fire Smarts checklists. In fact, I'll ask Josh to paste a couple links in our chat about real advances that have been made, even as recently new publications from last June about Fire Smart and such. So this question, I'll turn back to you, Laird, is what measures are being implemented to reduce future wildfire risk?
Sure. This was so from the very beginning in the weeks following, a couple of weeks following the fire, we participated with representatives from Fire Smart from Build Alberta and talked about what we could do and what we should do as part of the rebuilding. And I think this actually relates to another question that was in later about building back better from Andrew Giles. Initially, I think we had grand hopes of we're going to institute this as a requirement to build to Fire Smart standards. We're going to really raise the level of rebuilding to sort of a almost utopian kind of version, which sounds really great until you get to the financial reality of what insurance coverage is. And what people's pocketbooks can withstand, and the parity issue of literally in some neighborhoods, you have a burnt out house next to 3 perfectly standing houses as they were before. They may have some smoke damage, but they're largely untouched. Telling the person who just lost their home that they're going to have to implement $150,000 worth of Fire Smart new build requirements is probably not the message they want to hear, especially if they were underinsured. And we found there was a tremendous number of people who found themselves with suboptimal insurance coverage. What we did do was we did modify a significant number of our internal policies. So there was an architectural motif guideline for Jasper that required a certain number of architectural features that frankly were not helping us on the Fire Smart side. So things like wood sashes, cedar shakes, even landscaping. Our landscaping guidelines were pretty lush. And then following the fire, we took the approach that, hey, we need to make a a concerted effort here to reduce that risk. So some of those elements were removed, and then we provided guidelines on, we strongly recommend that you build, a fire-resistant roof. We didn't go as far as requiring a metal roof. We didn't go as far as requiring metal windows, but we certainly, or fire-resistant PVC windows, but we certainly modified what we could to provide the availability of those choices, and have made some targeted changes to requirements in order to, I would say, split the difference between what we would really like to see and what's a financial reality for people. I don't think any Canadian would be happy to learn that half of the people who were in the fire, who were affected directly by the fire, weren't able to rebuild their home because we added a whole sea of new requirements on the way through. So we've tried to split the difference in there, and we work closely with the IBC and Build to try and ensure that everybody's following the best possible processes. But it's an imperfect world.
Thank you for that really transparent and informative answer. Sounds very much about sort of Canadian compromise and finding the path forward. There's a number of other questions, but we've run really low on time. Perhaps we can come back if I'd encourage kind of more dialogue in the chat on these questions, and we'll certainly be glad to capture kind of any other responses. You'll have Laird's contact information, but there's a lot of thank yous I'm seeing pop up in the chat for the time that you took to explain a complex challenge for us. With that, I think I'm going to turn, unless there's outright revolt, to say thanks very much, Laird, for opening our eyes, and say, Dan, over to you for our next presenter. If that's...
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Laird.
Great, thanks, Chad. Thanks, Laird. That was really interesting. And just a note for everyone that we are recording this session, and you'll be able to watch it later on as well if you missed part of Laird's talk. So next, we're going to move on to a presentation by Nicholas Gazzo from the National Model from Codes Canada. He's going to talk about the Harmonized Code Development Systems work on climate change adaptation. So quick intro to Nicholas before I pass it over to him. Nicholas is the lead technical advisor for the National Model Codes Committee on Climate Change Adaptation, working within the Harmonized Code Development System. Nicholas has background in building science and has worked on proposed code changes related to accessibility, lateral loads, encapsulated mass timber construction, and overheating. So thanks very much, Nick, and we'll pass it over to you.
Switching platforms, had to figure out where my unmute went, so hopefully you can hear me. A nod from anybody. Okay, perfect. Thank you for having me. As just mentioned, my name is Nicholas Gazzo. I work with Codes Canada, that's National Research Council of Canada. Specific to this topic, I'm the lead technical advisor for the National Model Codes Committee on Climate Change Adaptation. And just a upfront thank you for your interest in the work of the Harmonized Code Development System, especially as it relates to this topic. So while the main topic of my presentation is about the code's work on climate change adaptation, I think some context is first helpful. So I'll touch on what the national model codes are, what it means for them to be objective-based codes, and the structure of the Harmonized Code Development System. And then I'll look at the mandate of the National Model Codes Committee, or NMCC, on climate change adaptation specific to this code cycle. And then we can go to questions if there are any. So first, what are the national model codes? They have no force of law until adopted by a province or territory. They are a set of minimum acceptable measures required to achieve the objectives. And what does that mean? It means that the code only contains requirements that need to be regulated. For example, there's no requirement that corner trim be used for vinyl siding. It is certainly acceptable to do so, but it's just not considered a minimum. The code does not address everything. So that just means that it doesn't address every characteristic of a building. Code doesn't address aesthetics, privacy, or the protection of building contents, and the safety of construction workers. There's some other, of course, areas as well. Some of these are addressed in other regulations or municipal bylaws, such as like how color palettes for houses, or just what was just explained for Jasper, and how some of the architectural features were requirements. Even if the code addresses an issue, it doesn't mean that the code addresses it in all aspects. So one of the objectives of the code is to address noise protection, but the codes only address airborne noise, not structure-borne noise, exterior noise, or noise from plumbing installations, and it only addresses airborne noise between dwelling units. The building code applies to the design, construction, and occupancy of all new buildings, and the alteration, reconstruction, demolition, removal, relocation, and occupancy of all existing buildings. Oh, I didn't realize I hadn't. The objectives of the code, they describe in broad terms the overall goals that the requirements in the national model codes are intended to achieve. The objectives describe undesirable situations and their consequences, which the code aims to prevent from occurring in buildings. The wording of most of the definitions of the objectives include two phrases, quote unquote, limit the probability, which is to acknowledge that the codes cannot entirely prevent those undesirable situations from happening, and quote unquote, unacceptable risks, which acknowledges that the codes cannot entirely eliminate all risk. The objectives are entirely qualitative and are not intended to be used on their own. So now switching to the actual harmonized code development system. To support harmonization, we transitioned into this new governance model in November of 2022. So if we start on the left in the blue hexagon, we have the Canadian Table for Harmonized Construction Codes Policy, or the table. It consists of deputy minister level representatives from federal, provincial, and territorial governments. Their goal is to provide strategic policy direction and oversight for the development of the national model codes. And then in the middle, we have the green, which is the board, or the Canadian Board for Harmonized Construction Codes. They are federal, provincial, and territorial representatives. They oversee and are responsible for the development of the national model codes based on the strategic policy directions provided by the table. Note that the table and the board are bolded, as they are the main decision-making bodies in the system. If we go to the top right of the figure, we have the board oversees several technical committees, also known as the National Model Codes Committees, one of which is the National Model Codes Committee on Climate Change Adaptation, who are doing the technical codes development work. These committees focus on technical topics like accessibility, fire, and life safety issues, and other topics that advance the strategic directions of the code. These committees develop the code changes, organize research, and engage in a lot of the focused technical discussions around the codes. If you now look at the top right, we have the Advisory Council, and they provide well-rounded feedback from industry, regulation, and other organizations. And then through, I guess, the bottom, the technical committees and the Advisory Council all receive input from the General Codes Committee, who can attend public meetings, submit code change requests, and submit public comments. These provide mechanisms for the general public to provide input at multiple stages of the code development process. Although not included in the diagram, there's also NRC Codes Canada, and then we work as the Secretariat support in technical and policy advice at all levels of this governance structure. So the Canadian Board for Harmonized Construction Codes, or the board, they approved for this code cycle to include a National Model Codes Committee on Climate Change Adaptation, and their mandate is to address overheating, durability, and resistance to deterioration, extreme winds, permafrost, wildland-urban interface, and flood-resistant design. So to accomplish this mandate, the chair of the NMCC Climate Change Adaptation decided to strike 6 task groups, each assigned one of the topics shown here. So the NMCC mandate relating to overheating focuses on continuing the work from the previous code cycle, which I got to be a part of, and they've been responsible for, they were the responsibility of what used to be the Standing Committee on Housing and Small Buildings, for anyone who is familiar with kind of like the old governance model. The task now, it continues on that work by addressing overheating in Part 9 dwellings and buildings, and we'll focus on building requirements that consider cooling loads, occupancy classification, and the effects of temperature and relative humidity on the health of building occupants. Something new to the task, not covered in the previous code cycle, is the consideration of the effects of passive cooling strategies. The mention or concerns, comments related to passive cooling strategies was something that we heard from many public review comments late in the code cycle. So I think moving into this code cycle, it was something that with time permitting, the board was like, yeah, please consider that and see what we can do. Now looking at the NMCC mandate relating to the resistance to deterioration. Currently it focuses on Part 3 buildings, but the board is expected to discuss this to determine if the mandate should be expanded to address more. Currently, the NMCC will be focusing on developing proposed code changes that support the resistance to environmental and climate change effects. Considerations made for air leakage, vapor diffusion, heat flow, moisture, and structural deterioration will be kind of front of mind. There's also the element of the NMCC's mandate, which will be on extreme winds. This will focus on recommending code changes to mitigate risks from future projected climatic data, extreme winds for high importance and post-disaster importance building categories described in Part 4 structural design, and separate but similarly work will be done for Part 9 houses and small buildings. I think there's 2 more, maybe 3, I may have lost count. The NMCC mandate relating to wildland urban interface, relating to what was discussed earlier, is set to address fire risks for buildings located in these areas that interface with wildlands. Some additional policy direction is needed though, just about the application of these requirements. That's needed from the board, since knowing the specifics about what types of buildings would need to follow these technical requirements will of course have a major influence on the technical requirements that will be developed. I think this is the second last one. The NMCC mandate relating to permafrost will focus on recommending code changes to adjust the designs of foundations in both continuous and discontinuous permafrost regions, as described in Part 4 structural design. And then, similar to some of the other tasks, there will be similar work which will be done for, but through prescriptive requirements for Part 9 houses and small buildings. But this would be specific to non-mandatory geotechnical assessments. This work will also recommend the inclusion of future projected data for permafrost regions. Lastly, the NMCC mandate on flood-resistant design focuses on recommending code changes to address flood loads and mitigate risks of water ingress during flooding events, based again on future projected climatic data for high importance and post-disaster importance buildings, as described in Part 4 structural design. And then, like previously mentioned, similar work will be done for Part 9 houses and small buildings. The work will also consider regional variations in flood-resistant design requirements appropriate for urban, riverine, coastal, and Great Lake flooding classifications. So each of these task groups will be working through their portion of the NMCC's mandate, and in doing this, they are responsible for harmonizing with provincial and territorial variations where possible, considering introducing references to new or existing standards and guidelines, identifying impacts of any developed proposed code changes, and highlighting any research needs. If proposed code changes receive public review comments, then these task groups would or could be asked by the National Model Codes Committee to address those comments before deciding whether these go to publication or kind of what the next steps are. So if you're interested in getting involved with the NMCC climate change adaptation or any of the other codes work based on what it is that we're working over the next few years, then I recommend that you send an email to, and I've listed it here, but I can also post it in the chat, this email address so that they can set you up with a Teamwork account. Teamwork is our online, or it's not ours, but it's the online platform that Codes Canada uses for sharing content for public meetings. Since the membership of the NMCC climate change adaptation is already finalized, so just the membership, as of memberships for the task groups, anyone trying to get involved at this time would be considered an observer, but observers play a huge role in the development of committee consensus, since they are allowed to share their opinions, ask questions, raise concerns, etc., just there's still observers can really get involved. All of the meetings for the Committee on Climate Change Adaptation and its task groups are all open to the public. So once you get an account on Teamwork, you can find an observer's public space project related to this task or any of its task groups, and it's there that would be posted agendas, meeting minutes, and you can also get notifications by email about when meetings are coming up. There's also like a calendar on there that you can find when other meetings are coming up, maybe not even just specific to something you're immediately interested in, but something that may also pique your interest. So again, yeah, just thank you for your interest in the Harmonized Co-Development System work on climate change adaptation, and I'm happy to try to answer any of your questions.
Great, thanks, Nicholas. So we'll take questions as we did before. Please raise your hand, unmute your mic, or use the chat section. While we're waiting, if Nicholas, you wouldn't mind going back to slide number 6, where you have a list of the topics that are being considered in under this code committee. There we go. Overheating.
The 6, yes.
So these are the topic areas. Task groups are going to be formed. They have the scope or objectives of their work include developing code change requests. So we will have proposed changes to the national building codes, model codes, plumbing codes, et cetera, in these topic areas over the coming next few years. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So we should, as this committee is sort of a climate change resilience adaptation committee, something we can probably do is keep an eye on these topic areas and look for proposed changes to the code and support them or suggest changes and that sort of thing. That's one way we could get involved in via this group. Do you have and just waiting for hands up? Sorry, go ahead, Nicholas.
I can just add to that. Because you may have been leading me, I'm not sure. But yeah, so if you're not maybe having the time to get involved with the actual meetings, but you do want to kind of see what's being proposed to be changed in the code, all proposed code changes after a certain point, if they're really being considered for publication in the code, they are sent out for a public review where anyone from the public is invited to review what's being proposed. You can see a nice kind of comparison of what exists in the code and what's actually being proposed to be changed. There's a summary of the potential impact of that change, both financial and kind of performance impact, or what does it mean for safety, or whatever objective or problem it's aiming to fix. And then yeah, just anyone from the public can share their thoughts, thinking maybe they think that something needs to be more clear in the way that the requirement is written, or you think that maybe something in the impact analysis hasn't been accurately done. So yeah, that's certainly an opportunity. If you don't have the time to get involved with the task group, although we would love that for you to get involved, then there's still that opportunity to just look and review and share your comments on what's actually being considered kind of near its final step before being included in the code.
Okay, great. Thanks. And to be clear, there is an opportunity now, because these task groups have not yet been formed, to volunteer to participate. Is that true?
So the task groups have their formed membership. So, but anyone can still join meetings as observers. It's just the small distinction between being an observer to a meeting and being a member of that committee. But certainly anyone can still join the meetings.
Okay, understood. I still am not seeing hands up, so I've got more questions. So one topic area that you mentioned is still under sort of decision by the policy table is wildland urban interface fire. We just had that discussion with about Jasper. I'm wondering what are the criteria that are being considered by that group to decide whether or not it should be incorporated or should be included in this adaptation work.
I don't know that I'm prepared to talk about what it is that they're actually considering to change or clarify. I know that.
To clarify the question, not what they're going to change, but how would they make a decision that it should be within the scope of this work?
How would they make the decision? I'm not sure how they would make the decision. So at the board level, because it is representatives from each of the provinces and territories, they are looped in with what is kind of important to each of their own, their province and territory. So finding out what their province is seeing as an issue or an area that needs to be addressed is kind of the purpose of having the board, the policy section of our governance model kind of at the helm of making decisions on what policy decisions should be addressed through or not policy decisions. They make the policy decisions that then the technical requirements have to address.
Right, right. Okay, so you're saying it's sort of driven largely by the perspective of the members of this board, which are largely provincial code development agency representatives.
Entirely, yeah.
Okay, great. Frank Lohman's got his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, I thought I'd help you out with hands up. Thanks for the presentation, Nick. Great overview to overall the work. I have two questions. One is a very simple one, maybe for you just clarify on flood-resistant design. You mentioned on the slide only part 4, and then you said, and then we'll do part 9. Is that in this code cycle, or is that a future consideration in the flood-resistant design?
Oh, well, okay, but if I said and then part 9, I don't think that's what I meant to say. That may have been, it's meant to be all in this code cycle.
Okay, so then I guess it was just missing on the slide there. So it's part 9 as well. Okay, no, that's okay. The other question I had, and you just started touching on it, and Dan's question, I guess, went in that direction as well. In some of the slides, you said subject to policy guidance, and you explained that that's coming from the board. For the embodied carbon and operational carbon work, we have seen policy consultations before any change comes to public review. I'm wondering, has any of this happened for adaptation, a policy consultation on, for example, I mean, and just to strike the context is a bit broader for everyone else, building codes currently do not address extreme events. And so that would be one question, I guess, that would have to be a policy decision. Will building codes from now on address extreme events? Because that may have legal implications and all kinds of stuff. So is there policy consultation coming on that? Do you know what the status is? Or is that not? Because you said subject to policy decisions.
I'm unaware of the status of how that's being decided by the board, whether that is, as you mentioned, something that I guess has been done before for embodied carbon. I just have it in the terms of reference for the NMCC on climate change adaptation that portion of the terms of reference was still, I can't remember if the exact wording was subject to further board direction, but that's kind of the essence of it.
So then maybe back to the two chairs, Dan and to Chad, if there is, maybe we should follow up if there is a policy consultation coming on adaptation. And I think that would be the perfect place for this group to actually participate and give their opinions. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Again, any more questions, please unmute yourself or put your hand up. I guess one additional question is about timeline. So the goal here is to have a set of proposed changes fully reviewed or available with the target of the 2030 national model codes. Is that correct?
Yep.
So do you sort of foresee like a process where the proposed changes have to be completed by the year before 2029? Anything you can share on the timeline would be interesting.
Right. So I think that the final deadline for the approval of the proposed changes, I think it's about a year before the 2025 would be published. So kind of either very, very early 2029 or late 2028. But then there's certainly we have many public review there's many different public reviews so that not everything gets sent at the last second. So there's public review. I think the earliest one is in December of this year, or at least the deadline is. And then throughout the next 2 years, there are several public review periods during which time, depending who's ready with proposed changes, they get sent out at that time, and then the public can get involved, sharing their concerns, comments, or support of those changes at that time. But it's really, I think most of the work has to be done over the next 2 years.
Okay, great. Thanks. We have two questions here in the chat, and then I see Chad put his hand up. We'll get to these questions first. First question from Vivian. Thank you for the presentation. Does the Wildland Urban Interface Task Group plan to also incorporate future projected climate data when estimating wildfire risk?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it does, but I should probably confirm that before I say that. I can go check in the next couple of minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Well, why don't we get back to, we can get back to the group with the notes on a response to that question.
Sure.
Okay. So next question is from Gerald Smith. Is it possible to reach out to one of the task group contacts to discuss an issue or gap? They found a gap during their work concerning wildland urban interface fire.
So the best way to submit, I think what you're describing is something that would be submitted through a code change request. So, and I can provide a link for this as well, but on the National Research Council Codes Canada webpage, somewhere on it, there's a link to submit code change requests where you basically describe what part of the code of the National Model Code that you're seeing an issue with, what you think should be changed, your reasoning for it, your name, and just a few other just general form type things. And then that gets forwarded through our through a process that makes sure that it goes to the board assigns whatever topic area needs to look at this, and it sounds like if it's wildland urban interface, that would eventually be handed to the National Model Codes Committee on Climate Change Adaptation.
Okay, I see. And maybe just for the interest of this group, Gerald, if you could give us a little info on the gap that you're referring to.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I'm from the BC Interior. I work for the provincial government in emergency management and climate readiness. And the issue has to do with roofing vents. FireSmart Canada does provide some guidelines that say if you're building in the WUI, that your roofing vents need to have screening that I believe that is 6 millimeters or less. So the first issue, roofing contractors in Kamloops, and I contacted 8 different companies, weren't familiar with these specific roofing vents and FireSmart Canada's requirements, which was surprising because if you know Kamloops, we're right in the WUI. So that was the one issue. The other issue that we tried to actually purchase these vents, we couldn't find any in Canada. And apparently they are available from the United States because California adopted these vents for their building. So I don't know if it has to do with this would have to do with the specific building code, but I kind of wanted to raise the issues that not many people, at least in our town, know about these specific vents, and they're very difficult to find in Canada. So I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me to do one of those code change requests for this issue, but I just kind of wanted to raise the awareness.
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing that up. It could be submitted through a code change request. The new kind of structure of our terms of reference, kind of a part of this whole new governance model, is to allow the task groups and the National Model Codes committees to be a little bit more flexible with the problems they're addressing, or I guess, less limitations on how they are to address the problem. So currently, the terms of reference for each of those task groups, it say that you have to basically review the code change requests that are submitted for that task group, but then kind of in a broader look, also just address wildland urban interface. So if it's something that is very specific to what's kind of already described in the terms of reference, then it may not actually be needed that a code change request be submitted. It just sounds like what you're describing is pretty on topic with what they're all ready to be doing. So because that's the case, I don't think that it would actually have to be a full longer process where you submit your own change.
and it's good. I think if it actually did get adopted into the National Building Code, and if it's there as code and it gets adopted as regulation, then I'm sure the supply of these specific roofing vents would become available. I'm sure somebody in Canada would start, producing these type of vents to meet the code requirements.
Thanks very much for that discussion. Those are great points. I think we're gonna have to end it here. Just want to quickly respond that there is a new standard that's being developed based on the National Wildfire Guide for Canada that will include provisions like you're mentioning there, screening, 3mm screens for vents, non-combustible screening, that sort of thing. Supply is definitely an issue. We're hoping by moving these topics through the building industry and standards and codes that manufacturers will increasingly get on board. But that's a great point. And it's interesting to know that you're working in that area. We do have I saw Frank had his hand up before. I see some more comments in the chat. So Nick, if you have a chance to have a look and respond, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll continue the discussion later. And I think we should also reach out to these task groups as they continue their work over the next couple of years and have them have a discussion with us as well. Nicholas, thanks very much for your presentation. Very clear, the process that Codes Canada is going through now. We're all really happy to see this work. So thanks for your contribution here.
Thank you for having me.
Great, thanks. So we are going to move on now to our roundtable session. So we did have a couple of people sign up to provide a quick overview of some important work. And that includes Jessica Conde from Standards Council of Canada and Alexandra Maxim from National Research Council. So we'll start with Jessica, and then we'll invite Alexandra. And if you have something you'd like to share, as we mentioned before, related to the topics we're talking about today or anything else, you can put your hand up, and if we have time, we'll give you a chance to speak. So please, Jessica.
Thank you, Dan. Those were great presentations. So from the Standards to Support Resilience and Infrastructure program at SCC, we have a few open calls out. We have 3 open calls, one for NSCs, which are National Standards of Canada, one for updates to NSCs. But then the one we're very excited about is the Flexible Standard Solutions one, which is open to basically anybody to provide some ideas of what we need to support resilience. And so all of these calls for proposals are closing on November 14. So please take a look. I'll probably share the link later. And so we're always excited about the flexible ones because ideas come from everywhere. But we are looking forward to seeing what people have put in. We already have a great number. So November 14 is the closing date for that. In August, we also helped publish the Thermal Comfort in Playgrounds, Plain Language Guidance Material in preparation for the 2026 heat season, and it was presented in a webinar by Dr. Heather Olson. And so that's something that is continuing to evolve in our work at SCC. And finally, the highlight of why we wanted to give our roundtable update is that we do have a series of policy roundtables that are taking place at the end of the month as side events to the ISO TC 207, which is based on environmental management. And so the first one is Advancing Climate Resilience of Canadian Public Health Systems. That's taking place October 27th and 28th in Toronto. The good thing about this is because it's a side event to this international gathering of over 260 people from a whole bunch of countries, as I last heard, is that we kind of get focused on Canada. And also we're trying to make sure that we have good engagement. We want that to inform what we're going to call a policy roadmap for standardization within the health systems resilience in Canada. And then following that, the next 2 days, we are having another policy roundtable on advancing Canadian water infrastructure resilience. And that, again, is very much geared towards engagement and getting feedback and building out a policy roadmap to see standardization gaps within the water sector and also improving resilience on the Canadian context. So these are 2 amazing workshops that we're planning. We're looking forward to what we get out of this to help hopefully inform our work in the future. And then last but not the least of this series of workshops, we have Digital Horizons on October 31st. And that's all about innovation. So there will be sector-specific conversations in regards to water, energy, agriculture, as well as transportation. So if you would like to be invited to these workshops, because they're by invitation only, I'll put our email in the chat. We have invited a number of people on this call, but we want to make sure that it's very focused. We want to make sure that we get the best possible advice in building out this. Thank you very much, Chad. I was going to post that. But yes, please do contact us. Registration for these workshops actually closed on October 15. So the earlier, the better. And we only have a constrained space. And we do have some wonderful lunchtime keynote speakers that have been confirmed, and so those names will be coming up. But when you look at that link, you'll have an idea of the workshop packages and what's coming up for those workshops. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jessica. Always good to hear about Standards Council's work. And I see that Chad put a link in the chat, and that's for the plenary, correct?
Yes, but if you scroll down, you'll see all the different workshop packages with regards to everything. So it's like the full page, the full homepage, but you get to see what's going on while we're having these workshops as well, and just the lineup of speakers that are going to be at that event.
Okay, great. Great, thanks again. And next we have Alexandra from NRC. Sorry, Alexandra. Oh, we cannot hear you. Yeah, okay. I see that you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. We'll give you please take a second and try again. And while we're waiting, please put your hand up if you like and share any updates. I see Joanna's and Ryan have their hands up as well. So Joanna.
Sorry, I have a delay on my video. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that some of the first outputs from the Canadian Infrastructure Council are coming out. This is the What We Heard report that summarizes what was heard during all the consultation with external and organizations that input and wrote in, and all the numerous meetings. I think 150 different organizations contributed. And there's also the state of play reports are coming out. So the water and wastewater report looking at where we're at in terms of our infrastructure also coming out. So just to make sure that everybody knows they're coming.
Great, thanks, Joanna. And we'll share links to those reports when they're ready to as well with this group. Alex, how are you doing with your audio?
Can you hear me?
Yes, good.
Okay, I can't hear you, but you can hear me. So let's just go with it. All right. Apologies. Okay, so a few things to mention. So we do have the Canadian Highway Bridge Design Code. We have a press release that came out. It's coming up October 7th today. Let's see. I have no notes of Mary Ann, so I'm kind of reading off my screen here. So the CSA group may want to speak about this. I know they're here as well. I have a link if you guys want me to share that, if we don't have anybody else here who has that. So I can put that in there. Okay, I'll do that in a second. And so let's see. Okay, so yeah, if you do want to share on LinkedIn, please do. Fairly short comment. Oh no, sorry, I'm reading my notes. I'm so sorry, it's been a day. Yeah, so we're proud of the work. We're really excited about it. So I'll share the link here. And then, please let people know about the news. And I have some quotes that I will be forwarded by a few people later on. I can send those over. There's an international conference on the durability of building materials. It's going to be in July, the 2024th. It's going to be in Montreal. So we've already shared some details about this and thing at the last meeting, but I have the conference website I can add as a link. So it looks like we're hosting this conference with McGill, and the call for abstracts is closed, but registration isn't open yet. So I do want to highlight some stuff from the resilient residential retrofits from the CRB theme. And we want to highlight the database that was created with the support from Partners for Action. And if we don't have that, I can also share that link as well in the chat. And so apologies, I can't hear any of you, but I have that link as well. So that was a public-facing database, and it's pretty good to see. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Okay, yeah, I can share those links. Apologies for my audio and my a little bit scattered stuff. I've been having lots of technical difficulties today. All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Alex. Good to hear from you as well. And finally, Ryan.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone. Just a quick note here from the Canadian Centre for Climate Services. We've pushed the new version of climatedata.ca live with our regional climate partners a couple weeks ago. So if you're not familiar with the product, climatedata.ca is kind of Canada's central climate data repository. There's lots of future climate projections, historical climate data. I think of big interest to this group potentially the Fire Weather Projections app, which is projections of future hot, windy, dry days that drive fire risk. So I'm going to pop some links in the chat, and I really, really would appreciate folks passing this news around. We're really proud of the work. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ryan. That sounds really great to hear that that product's out. Looking forward to checking that out. Thanks, everyone, for putting your hands up and giving updates. This is exactly what we're hoping for in this session. So in future sessions, if you have something you'd like to share quickly or take a little bit more time, let us know, or feel free to put your hand up during the roundtable next time we meet in December. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Chad to wrap up the meeting.
Really, not too much more to say other than please do take advantage of our member directory and your ability to connect with Dan and me and Anna going forward. We're really thrilled to be co-chairing this working group with you and advancing our knowledge and our practices across the country. Thanks for being here today. Have a good rest of your day.